I'd like to tell everyone about Natchez, Mississippi, particularly about Natchez during the month of March, when the city plays host to thousands of visitors during the annual pilgrimage. Now, if I only had a little Southern belle here, someone to talk to about these antebellum days.
What I do?
Well, who are you?
I'm Jean.
Well, won't you be seated?
Thank you.
I was thinking of someone who knows Devereaux, the Burn, Elms Court. To those of us who've made the pilgrimage, these are familiar names. Do you know them?
Of course. But you've mentioned only 3 of about 30 fine old mansions that hold open house. During the rest of the year, old Natchez families like the Marshalls, the Trimbles, the Stantons, and the Kellys lead their usual lives. But during pilgrimage month, the clock is turned back about 100 years to the time just before the war between the states.
Ladies of the household, their servants, even the little children, dress in the fashion of that bygone day.
That's right. And the social activities, which believe me are many, repeat the pattern of an era when hospitality was exceedingly lavish and the life of a Southern belle was tremendously gay and exciting.
It takes 3 days to see all of the homes.
And do you know that in some cases, the descendants of the original owners are there to display beautiful jewels of art in their original settings? They really convert an entire city into what amounts to a living museum.
I thought I knew about Natchez and the pilgrimage. In our limited time, let's take a look at a few of the highlights. Let's have a modern Natchez belle enact a day in the life of what might have been her great-great-grandmother, whom we'll call Nancy.
All right, let's pretend it's 1861. Nancy's up early. Ordinarily, she sleeps till noon, but this is the morning of the hunt, and she's excited. Trained to ride expertly, she's planning to give her escort a merry chase in more ways than one. 100 strokes of the hairbrush, Mammy. Not one more and not one less.
And there's her escort waiting in the garden. I suppose no popular Southern belle would dream of being ready on time. Men had to wait then as long as they do now.
Well, here she is, and in the traditional hunting costume. Mammy won't let her appear until she's spick and span, but if her escort is impatient, he hides it well. Those charming manners mark him as a typical young gentleman of Natchez. He's been educated on the continent and trained to manage the family plantation and to carry on social traditions.
The setting of the hunt breakfast is Dunleith, spacious home of the Carpenters. The guests assemble and they toast their success. That's a rousing hunt song, and with glasses raised on high, shall we propose a toast? Here's to the hunt. May the bugle call ring clear, and the baying of the hound spell disaster for Reynard. And while the hunting party pursues the fox, let's visit some of the magnificent old homes thrown open for the pilgrimage. Natchez is built on a bluff overlooking the Mississippi, and from the gallery at Bontura, we have one of the best views of the river. Stephen Foster, Mark Twain, and other noted people visited here in bygone days. From the gallery, fascinated spectators once watched the Natchez and the Robert E. Lee steam up the river in a race from New Orleans to St. Louis. Now where, Jean?
On to Airlie. Built during the Spanish occupation more than 160 years ago, it's owned by the Ayers P. Merrill family.
Yes, one of the 3 sisters tells us that the wrought iron fireplace, fashioned in one piece, was brought to Natchez from Portugal when the house was built.
These medallions are unique heirlooms which have puzzled the most astute authorities on China. Although the question of whether they're Dresden, Meissen, or some other ware has not yet been settled, there's no question of their delicate loveliness.
Certainly not. I'm told they were brought here about 1840 by the American ambassador to Belgium, great-grandfather of the present occupants.
I'm intrigued by this chaperone sofa, as functional as any of today's furniture. When that uncomfortably low back drove away the unwelcome third party, the extra seat could be used for chess or other games. How we do get around. Now we're arriving at Cherokee. Family and friends are gathered in the drawing room of Mr. and Mrs. Charles J. Byrne. The mirror reflects the beauty of the French crystal chandelier, unspoiled when it was wired for electricity. Children are a welcome part of every gathering. At an early age, they learn the social behavior which will be expected of them later. Charming curtsy from a Southern belle, not a day over 4, has already won us over. Each family cherishes the hope that its home and heirlooms may never pass out of the line of descent. Great sacrifices have been made in many cases in the valiant effort to hold a beloved ancestral mansion.
and well worth the sacrifice. Let's take a quick look at a few of the other homes which hold open house. The Briars, beloved shrine of the Confederacy, where Jefferson Davis was married to Verena Howe. Richmond, home of the John Shelby Marshalls, houses a piano which accompanied Jenny Lind when she sang in Natchez. Glenfield, relics found here are evidence of the successful struggle to prevent Union forces from invading Natchez. Ravenna, built in 1836 in the Bayou country, through which food was smuggled to the Confederate Army. Longwood, never completed after workmen in 1861 suddenly exchanged tools for guns. Gloucester, home of Mrs. Lennox Stanton, once occupied by the first governor of Mississippi Territory.
We must stop at beautiful Linden, where the ladies gathered in the dining room were discussing great-grandmother Connor's tablecloth, and also a desk made by slaves from fruit woods on her plantation.
What's that contraption over the table, a fan?
Oh, you're partly correct. It's a punka. The punka created a breeze and also kept the flies from joining the dinner guests. These custard cups with tops are of French china more than a century old. Mrs. Fauntleroy, our hostess, says that they have been dubbed syllabub cups.
Oh, haven't you heard the family joke about them? It seems that at a party one night, a couple of the guests insisted upon too much seasoning in their cups, and then had difficulty pronouncing their syllables. As we make the pilgrimage, we travel the historic Natchez Trace, which links many of the mansions. Trace, I've discovered, means beaten path, and in this case it was a path beaten by the hooves of the buffalo. Following this course, the Natchez, Choctaw, and Chickasaw Indian tribes developed a trail which stretched from Nashville to Natchez. Its miles have been traveled by Andrew Jackson, John James Audubon, Aaron Burr, the Marquis de Lafayette, Jefferson Davis, Henry Clay, and Meriwether Lewis. Today it is a winding, sunken road, in places some 30 feet lower than its wooded banks. But soon we may travel a modern parkway, for the trace, too, is being restored.
Stately Montaigne is our next stop. Romanesque columns and wrought iron balustrades survived the ravages of war, although its ownership by a Confederate general brought rough treatment. Troops stabled their horses in the drawing rooms and used a costly piano as a feed box. It is now the home of the Kendalls. Baby Kendall Hobson represents the fourth generation of the family to live at Montaigne. Among the works of art that escaped injury is a Queen Anne clock, dating back to 1700.
This beautiful antique shows the day of the month and the position of the moon, as well as the time of the day. And the clock reminds us that much as we would like to tarry at Montaigne, there are other places to be seen. Twin Oaks, peaceful slopes belie the Indian battles fought here and its occupation by Union troops. Arlington, built in 1816, contains its original furnishings as well as collections of paintings, books, and fine glass. Mount Repose, occupied continuously since its construction in 1824 by descendants of the Bisland family. Rosalie, owned by the Mississippi Society of the DAR, built in the shadow of Fort Rosalie by Peter Little, whose bride filled the house with visiting ministers. Mr. Little built the parsonage for the use of the clergy. Devereaux, built in 1840. You saw this mansion in the old silent movie Heart of Maryland. Here we are at scenic Greenleaves, built before the War of 1812. It has been in the same family for more than 100 years. The fifth generation now occupies it.
It's tea time, and like Goldilocks, you may have your tea from a big cup, a medium-sized cup, or a tiny wee cup. All are found in the set of Chelsea china used by Mrs. Melchior of Beltshoover. Sevres vases adorn the mantel, a European import. The chandelier is of French bronze and crystal. At each end of twin parlors, oval gold leaf mirrors reflect the hand-carved French rosewood furniture.
On display is a priceless set of china, believed painted by Audubon himself. It boasts a different bird on each of the 225 pieces which remain of the original 300. Since there was no kill in Mississippi, the 3 sets Audubon painted were sent to France for firing.
Well, and who is this? I believe it's Mrs. Edwin J. Byrne in her slightly outdated phaeton. Dobbin finds himself an appropriate parking spot, and Mrs. Byrne dismounts gingerly. Takes a bit of energy, I'd say, to climb those steps of Connelly's Tavern on Ellicott's Hill. In 1936, the Natchez Garden Club bought this inn, restored it, and made it into their headquarters.
A century and a half ago, the Trace was infested with highwaymen, bandits that is, who came riding up to the old inn door. Their signatures remain etched in the bullet-scarred bar. Tradition has it that Aaron Burr, Blenner Hassett, and their accomplices met here to hatch their scheme for setting up an independent southwestern nation, a plot for which Burr was later tried for treason. Just below the tavern is the hill where the American flag was raised for the first time in the lower Mississippi Valley.
Well, on to Lansdowne. At Lansdowne, built in 1852, we meet the owners, Mr. and Mrs. George M. Marshall III, and his sister, Mrs. James Holler Ward, descendants of the original owner. Mrs. Marshall and her daughter will entertain guests as they might have when their house was new. Draperies cut in one piece and known as lambrequins add distinction to the room. The original wallpaper, French hand-block Zuber, is still in use. The mantel is of imported white marble.
Did you know that the bronze chandeliers were once supplied with illuminating gas from the private plant on this estate? This was the first gas plant in Mississippi.
But dear as these possessions are and revered for their antiquity, the prized treasure of the household is quite new. Margaret Catherine, just 5 months old, is held here by her mother. Baby Margaret is wearing a dress made for her great-great-grandmother. Perhaps these are the children who will carry on the proud possession of Lansdowne by the Marshall family. The rosewood bed is still equipped with a cord used to pull up mosquito netting, as demonstrated here by Mrs. Ward.
What about the foot of the bed?
The posts at the foot can be raised to keep the netting from encumbering the feet of the sleeper.
What? No mosquitoes today? It looks as though we've caught up with our southern belles. Here they are at the Elms, more than a century and a half old, and now the home of the Joseph Kellogg's. This curved wrought iron stairway at one time led from one gallery to another on the outside of the house. It is believed to have been imported from Portugal. But who can talk of architecture when southern belles are in view? With their beaux, they are about to leave for a formal dinner party at Hope Farm.
We wonder if any of these girls will find a romance as exciting as that of Nancy Thornhill, who lived at the Elms during the war. She married a handsome Union officer stationed there as a guard during hostilities.
Nancy and her friends are greeted at Hope Farm by their hostess, Mrs. Balfour Miller. The largest part of this home, built in 1775, antedates all of the Natchez houses. One of its attractions is its provincial atmosphere, highlighted by beautiful crystal, silver, and china, and the quiet taste of its authentic furnishings. Mrs. Miller, founder of the Natchez Pilgrimage, is always ready to discuss her beloved city, both its past and its future. In 1932, it was she who suggested a tour of antebellum homes instead of gardens, when state garden clubs convened in Natchez. Her idea caught hold, but it took a lot of persuasive talk before families agreed to open their homes for a full month to visitors from all over the nation. Through her leadership, the entire city was induced to participate.
Today, the city's 2 garden clubs jointly sponsor the pilgrimage and strive to live up to their slogan, "Where the Old South Still Lives."
Pilgrimage headquarters is the Elks Club. Each of the 30 mansions is open for a half day every 3rd day, and the complete schedule of tours requires 3 days. At headquarters may be seen cars bearing licenses from every state as visitors recapture the glory of the city which has lived under 6 different flags. And here's Elgin Plantation, once a small settlement within itself. Materials were prepared here for construction of the house. Elms Court, occupied for generations by the Surgett family, famous as the House of 1,000 Candles. Dunleith, built in 1847 and occupied by the Carpenter family for 5 generations. Monmouth, for many years the home of John A. Quitman, United States Senator and Governor of Mississippi, and now owned by Mrs. Hubert Barnum. Hawthorne, the home of the Carl A. McGees, typical of the elegance of the Old South. The Burn, built in 1832, the house and gardens have been restored by Mr. and Mrs. S.B. Lobb. Melrose, owned by the George M.D. Kelly family for 5 generations. House and furnishings are practically unchanged since antebellum days. Inside is the original Audubon panoramic painting of Natchez, painted while the ornithologist lived in Natchez, teaching music and painting. A never-to-be-forgotten part of the pilgrimage is the Confederate Tableau. The camera did not catch the lighting effects which enhance its beauty. The youngsters love the fun, but they know that this is serious business, for they have been rigorously trained for the parts they play in this pictorial history of Natchez.
Presiding over the festivities are the king, splendid in his officer's uniform, and the queen, chosen from the beauties of Natchez.
The whole town cooperates to make the celebration a success. Those who can't find antebellum costumes in their attics hunt out the local dressmakers to create replicas.
Here, down through the arch of swords, comes our queen.
Teenagers get a real kick out of dancing the polka, a dance popular during the gay days before the war.
Training for the Queen's Ballet begins when girls are 4 or 5 years old, and the dancers are all of high school age. The color and the pageantry of the tableau unfolding the exciting history of Natchez makes this a most thrilling spectacle.
Climax in the day of our Belle Nancy is the elaborate ball held at Stanton Hall.
And Stanton Hall is headquarters of the Pilgrimage Garden Club, you know. The 72-foot ballroom of the century-old mansion comes alive as gay, picturesque gowns blend with the settings of hand-carved Italian arches, white Carrara marble mantels, and elaborately carved bronze chandeliers. Dancers whirl to the strains of a sedate waltz.
But look at that polka. That was a snappy dance a century ago.
Back in her room and the ball over, Nancy ponders for a moment the rumors of war which were the only dark spot in her day. But surely nothing will come of this. Tonight she's young and happy and getting kind of sleepy. She reads her daily chapter from the scriptures, then she falls asleep and dreams of mansions and hunting mounts, of beaux and parties.
We have been able to show only a few of the highlights during the pilgrimage. Natchez is easily reached and can be included in a general tour of the Southland. Each home is a treasure trove of antiques, some imported, some made from materials on the grounds of the estates. Architecture is some of the most elaborate to be seen in any American city. Wouldn't you agree to that, Jean? Where did she go? Back into the past, I suppose, just when I was about to invite her to dinner. Why not come down yourself and enjoy the whole spectacle? A vacation in Natchez during the pilgrimage will not only take you to another place, but to another era.